Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of The Corner Office. And in the Corner Office, for the audience who's joining with us right now, it's where we talk to the ones who have braved the waters and have built the companies and organizations in various ways. And some of us would love to get. So this is us trying to understand the challenges that they face, the stories that they've braved, and the companies that they've created. And joining with us today is none other than the CEO of the National Pickleball League, Ron Shell. Welcome on the show, Ron.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks for having me on the corner office, and yeah, excited to talk about pickleball and the business journey to date.
Exactly. Lovely having you as well. And as usual, this podcast is brought to you by Connectix. And what Connectix does is we provide virtual staffing solutions to small business owners to make their day better so that they can focus on the business and grow it better. But back to you, Ron. So we just met, and it's a very unusual place that we are doing the podcast from, but I'm loving it here. But let's exactly say how you got into pickleball. How exactly
Of
did that
course.
happen?
Yeah, so look, we are obviously at one of the NPL centres, the Jar Pickleball Club in South Melbourne. We're both in different parts here, and look, I think pickleball, the journey for me started in the US, and I used to live in the US for 6 years and worked at my previous company, PointsBet, which was a sports betting startup tech platform. And in that time, towards the end of that journey in 2022, pickleball started to burst onto the scene. And I started to get asked every day, do you want to play? Do you want to play? And I'd never heard of this sport. It did sound a bit silly. And when I looked it up, it looked like it was only played by old people in retirement homes. And I love sport, but I thought I had enough sport. But it just kept coming up in conversation. And eventually I played in August 2022. And I realized very quickly why people were starting to get obsessed with it. It was really easy to play. It was very social. You can play many games. You can play with anyone. And the other thing is that people who don't normally love sport, they're not obsessed maybe with football, rugby, basketball, they were finding a new sport that they actually could connect with and they could feel like part of because they were able to play it and play it at a decent level and play it with their social circle. So when I moved back to Australia for various family reasons, I wanted to continue to be in the startup world and this time to start our own venture. And we looked into pickleball and we actually looked into paddle as well, which is the other fastest growing racket sport in the world. And we just thought there's an amazing opportunity in Australia to bring all the learnings from the US and start a brand here that resonates with the Australian market and that brings the sport, increases the accessibility and modernizes the image of pickleball. And that's how the vision of the National Pickleball League started in December 2022. So a lot of inspiration from the US and then sensing an opportunity in a market where there was only, 20,000 people maybe playing at the time and it really didn't have a good marketing. There was no infrastructure. We thought there's a great opportunity here for a business because we believe in the sport and the vehicle.
How just one particular game inspired you to start your own startup. That's amazing. But I'm going to single out two things that you just mentioned: no infrastructure and good opportunity.
Yeah.
People try to build something out of nowhere for an opportunity. But in your case, how exactly, right after moving back to Australia and going for a startup instead of an employment and braving the waters again, to use the word, what inspired
Yes.
you to do that and why pickleball?
Look, I think that for me, I quickly realized after my early career at Ernst & Young in audit that I wasn't made for the corporate world and that I loved the challenge of being exposed to every part of a business from day one. And the really difficult early days of the business, which are very scary when no one really listens. No one really cares about what you're doing. You have to work super hard to even, break through a lot of noise today, especially as people lose interest and have very short attention spans. But I find that part of growing a business fascinating. It also requires you to be across everything: operations, finance, marketing, sales, brand building, building communities face to face. There's so many aspects of it that make it really interesting compared to a traditional corporate job. And I think the best thing that I learned and I knew is that you can't have all the answers from day one. And so with any new venture, you just have to get started. You can overthink things for months and months on end. And if you do that, someone else will jump in and take the opportunity. The best way to learn is to fail quickly and to do as many things as possible within reason. And so that's what we started to do. We started to run open days at breweries where we just lined the courts with tape. We ran a social league at my old high school in Melbourne High School. We started to test things out, and we started to see whether people actually enjoyed the sport. And once we realized they did, the biggest thing that we saw was that they wanted to play, but there was nowhere to play. There were places to play where you could play twice a week at a certain hour, but there wasn't dedicated centers where you could come, at 7 a.m., at 10 a.m., at 3 p.m., at midnight. And so we quickly realized that if we wanted to build this sport, actually we needed to become and invest in property and be part of building the community that way, because the real true, interest and benefit of this sport is that it's an amazing grassroots sport. Anyone can play it. And so while we had aspirations to create this league and brand and be the professional arm in Australia, we understood that we needed a bottom-up approach. But for me, it's just like, hey, if there's an opportunity there, you need to dive right in, and you need to be able to, withstand failures, withstand setbacks, but learn from them as quickly as possible. And then that starts to shape your strategy, as opposed to building the perfect strategy before you launch, which for me never works, because you never actually have all the information to get it right. The customer, the market, everyone else tells you by their actions, what your strategy should be. And so going out there and trying things and putting on events and putting yourself out there is the easiest way to learn. And so, decided to dive right in. And, we tried a lot of things in the early part of 2023 before we decided to raise money, for the first indoor center in Australia, which we've visited together this morning.
Yeah. And it's amazing. And you kept on repeating the words, dive right in, start right now, don't waste
Yeah.
opportunity, someone else might bag it. And it's essential, right? And to the audience, if you listen quite carefully, you might hear the pickleball sounds there and the crowd cheering. And it's 11 a.m. in Australia. And just like what Ron mentioned, a dedicated place so that people who do not like soccer, basketball, or whatever else it is, that they can social mingle and also be part of it. So this is the beauty of the sport or the infrastructure that you've created, Ron. In all this ascent, when you started out in early 2023, pretty sure there were instances where you thought, okay, is it going to work out? What is it going to be? How exactly did you face those situations? The mentality behind it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I think it's very natural to have doubts at all times about everything. But I think, when you have some market data, which we did from the US, we weren't the first ones to bring the sport to this world. The US is 3 or 4 years ahead of us, and there's always been a lot of similarities between the US and Australia. We share pop culture. We like a lot of US sports. And so when you have, I guess, a nation like that with such a large data set where they were able to grow pickleball so quickly in a 3 or 4 year period, it gives you confidence that you can do something similar in Australia. Now, we're very different markets. We are much more relaxed, slower. We consume sports in slightly different ways, but there are enough similarities there that there's a bit of data to back it up. And then I think once you speak to people and start to see things yourself, that's when you realize, hey, look, we actually tried this with 100 people who have never played the sport before, and 95 of them had an amazing time. Like that's enough for you to be like, okay, well, if we can now create a proper business plan out of this, we've done enough market testing to realize there is something there. And so I think that's how you weather the doubts. And you've got to be realistic as well. If we started pickleball in Australia and we didn't see the success early on from, people actually adopting the sport and actually liking the sport, you have to be able to swallow your pride and be like, well, maybe this isn't the right opportunity for this market. And that's fine. Just because it works in North America and starting to be popular in Asia, it doesn't mean it will naturally be popular in Oceania. But if you put in the time to do the market research and you have some other markets that are similar enough, I think that's how you can overcome, a lot of the uncertainty. And then the other thing is we started to see other organizations or other people looking to do similar things. And so you're not the only ones thinking about it. And so now you understand there's an opportunity that other people are seeing, and it's just about creating the best strategy and the best team and the best brand to take advantage of the opportunity.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense in that regard. So for the past 18 months, how has the journey been?
It's been incredibly difficult and incredibly rewarding. And I think, every founder would say the same thing. I always say, like, people romanticize the idea of starting your own company. It's one of the most hardest, stressful, and time consuming things you'll do. For the most part, very little return in the early days and a lot of sacrifice. There is a reason why, most people should and do stay in the corporate world, and the flexibility and, I guess, financial stability that comes from there, because there's no guarantees with this. But I think, if you believe that this is the type of work that you want, and you get your most of your motivation out of building things from the ground up, this is an amazing path to take. What you need to consider is, like, you need an amazing team behind you, and you need to be able to have really difficult conversations with your team throughout the early days, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of highly
Yeah.
stressful moments. Cash is always tight and so important. A lot of people are trying to come into the same market. There's a lot of opportunities to really fail if you don't band together. But I think, the reward of building something from scratch, it's similar to grass growing in a way you don't really realize while you're doing it. But when people external to your company come and say, hey, how much have you guys achieved in the last 2 years, 2.5 years, you realize that it is a pretty special moment. And so I think, it's a lot of ups and downs. But if you have a vision and you have a great team and that are really, really capable, I think you can achieve special things.
Yeah, and more ups than downs. Hence why we are here talking about the past 18 months. Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, yeah. Um, Straightening from that, you mentioned that when we are running our own business, you get to be the marketer, you get to be the salesperson, you get to be the financier, you get to be the operations head and all that. But in such a case, how exactly do you balance each and everything while balancing the business? Does it mean that you have an extra, you mentioned that you have an extra team, but having an extra pair of hands on the deck, how exactly does does
Yeah.
that work for you?
Well, look, you've just got to be capable of doing 3 or 4 jobs at once when you're starting a brand and a business. And you have to be comfortable with that. And you have to be comfortable with context switching all the time. I think that's probably where people fall down the most, is that they are really brilliant people, but they're really brilliant with, set blocks of time. It doesn't work like that in a new business, especially when you're trying to grow a brand and a sport at the same time. You need to be able to switch context and switch roles. You need to be the CFO, the CMO, and the COO potentially all within 1 hour. And that takes a unique type of skill set. But it's also a really enjoyable way to understand every part of the business and be involved heavily. And so I think you need to find other people, as we've done with our founders, that also have the ability to do multiple roles. And eventually, once you have enough profit and revenue streams, that's when you can add, trusted extra people and potentially point them in more specified roles. But in the first few years, you have a role, but your role is actually 3 or 4 roles. And for those that like to be involved in a lot of business decisions, you get a lot of fulfillment out of having 3, 4, 5, 6 roles and being involved in so many different business decisions that you probably wouldn't be involved in if you were just sticking to your lane, in a traditional job. So I personally love that aspect of it, that you can be
Yeah.
involved in so many different areas and you can grow so many different skills in one day. But
Yes.
certainly as well, the downside of that is that, you do achieve great things if you can be focused. And I know Steve Jobs talks about focus a lot. A lot of great leaders do. And eventually you do need to find ways to really focus on the important things in the business and dedicate the right amount of time to them. And that's the great
Yeah.
challenge as you grow from a complete startup to a small to medium enterprise, and so on.
And then gradually be big corporate.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's the plan eventually. And when you have that, you do have a much more structured team. But I always believe in lean teams perform better than really big teams. And you have a smaller decision-making tree. And the longer you can keep on to that mentality, even once you are a big business, I think the more successful you can be. And so that's what I've learned in previous startups, and that's what we've certainly applied here to NPL as well.
Lovely, lovely. Love the systems thinking and love those small systems thinking, which you mentioned, even if the small organizations grow to a large extent, if the decision-making parts can be stemmed to a certain level, that itself can be the catalyst for growth. Uh, something for NPL, what does the future hold for NPL from time and beyond?
Yes. Well, look, I think what's unique about MPLJ is that the name suggests we are a league, but that's only 1/4 of our business now. So we run the professional league and tournament series in Australia. We also own property, the Jar Pickleball Club, which is currently 2, Melbourne and Sydney, but we hope to have 4 or 5 before the end of the year and 8 to 10 by the end of 2026. We will also be partnering with other venues as well. So there's the big property arm. Then there's a content, events, and marketing arm. We run activations at the Grand Prix, at the Spring Racing Carnival, at the Australian Open, everywhere to try grow the sport. And we're starting a company called MPL Events to take advantage of that. And then there's the technology arm. So we're actually in the process of building our own proprietary pickleball technology as well, which is our own software for running tournaments, leagues, for running sessions like at our centers. We've essentially built it for ourselves. And we're now spreading it out to the rest of Australia and actually the rest of the world with specifically Asia and the US as a plan. So the plan here is to really own every single pillar of pickleball because we believe it's an amazing community sport and an amazing commercial opportunity. And if you can own the technology, the places to play, be the number one brand in people's eyes and attract sponsorships and partnerships, and then, of course, funnel people to watch and care about the league in the long run, I think you can build an amazing ecosystem of pickleball that takes advantage of what we believe will be 2 or 3 million players playing in Australia, over the next 5 years.
So from 20,000, it grew to 150,000 in 18 months, and now from 180 to 3 million.
In another 2-3 years, we're hopeful. Yeah. I think it can have this sport has the potential for that hockey stick growth because it is a sport with the lowest barriers to entry that we've ever seen in terms of athletic ability requirement and in terms of where and how you can play it. You just need a paddle and a ball and you jump on straight away. And within 5 minutes, you're able to pick up the game. And there's so many variations you can do to include different people, to ensure that 6-year-olds can play with 80-year-olds and different, athletic and sporting abilities can play with each other. And that's why we've seen corporate and work being such a big part of the pickleball growth because, it's very hard to find an activity that everyone enjoys in a workspace. But pickleball seems to be one of those things that is able to bring people together.
And so we might potentially be looking at one of the sports that has one of the highest and the fastest adoption rate in the history of sporting, probably.
We hope so. And that's what we've seen in America and starting to see in Asia. The recent stats in Asia about a month ago was that 300 million people were playing the sport at least once a month. And this is the very start of the sport. So you can imagine with the numbers in Asia, 100x population of Australia, just where this sport can get to. And we've seen the adoption of table tennis, badminton, in the past by Asian countries. Pickleball can absolutely fall into that same level of adoption and growth. And I think it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, so fingers crossed, probably 2032, Brisbane could have pickleball or even beyond.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. That's the plan. I think a lot of people are working towards that. There needs to be a bit more stability from a governing body point of view internationally. But if that is achieved, we will hopefully have pickleball in Brisbane in our backyard. Which is really exciting, of course, for MPL looking to build and being the number one pickleball brand. That will obviously make everything we do elevate overnight when something like that is announced.
Oh, pretty amazing as to how you are trying to build an organization and then an ecosystem, as you mentioned. Everything regarding pickleball can become its own separate arm, like MPL events, MPL marketing, the technology arms, and also a social adoption, a social change which you're trying to create through NPL itself. In all this, where do you think the next 5 years of your life and NPL would stand?
Sorry, the question is the value or
Where do you think in the next 5 years you and NPL would stand?
where do we stand? Look, I think that's 5 years is a long time. 5 years would mean that I've been working on this for nearly 8 years. And what I think will happen in 5 years from now is that NPL will be the number one brand, not only in Australia, but also in Asia. And in terms of brand awareness, brand recognition, and brand recall. And that means we'll be running events in countries all over the world. And we'll be, I guess, one of the largest organizations that has been part of the movement of pickleball and changing people's lives. And I hope we have, one of the top 5 pickleball softwares as well that has been adopted worldwide, not just in those 2 regions. So that's where the vision of where MPL is going to go. And I think along the way, we're going to make a lot of people, really happy and really rediscover their communities and their social circles and their connection with well-being and mental health, because that's the beauty of this sport. And I think in an AI-driven future, having a sport which obviously needs to be played in person by human beings, it's going to be able to stand the test of time and be very unique in that way.
It would definitely stand the test of time. And pretty inspirational conversation, Ron. It has been, but before we call it an end for the session, is there anything else that you would like to leave with the audience with, specifically regarding pickleball or
No,
anyone who would want to start on their own ventures?
Yeah, I think, look, personally around pickleball, a lot of information you can find on us is on our website, mplpickleball.com.au or at MPL Pickleball Instagram, which is our shop front. But I think from starting your own ventures, it's, I think it's very fine for it to not be for everyone. Just because you have a good idea and you believe the flexibility is something that you want, you actually have a lot less flexibility than you think. However, if it's, something that is of interest to you, really build the right team around you and understand that it's going to be a really big sacrifice for potentially 5 to 10 years of your life. And if that's something that's still of interest to you when you hear those things, then it is the most rewarding thing you can do, from a personal business standpoint. So always happy to chat to budding entrepreneurs or business starters and talk through all the highs and lows, and very much always happy to host people at our JAR pickleball clubs looking to get into pickleball as well.
So there you go. You heard Ron. Anyone who's looking to try out pickleball in or around Melbourne, drop by at the Jar. And thank you so much, Ron. Thanks a lot for taking time of pickleball and being with me and on the show. Really appreciate it.
Amazing. Lovely to be on the show, Jay, and thanks for having us. And we look forward to playing a game soon.
Yes, for sure. And ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today with one of those wizards that we would love to learn from, and we'll be with you with another person and to learn about their wizardry as to how they brave the waters and build the organization. Till then, take care. No.